From the outside, it looked like another Hollywood victory in the making. But then, people started noticing something unusual, not in the movie itself, but in the people promoting it. Fans watched interviews closely. They compared red carpet appearances. They analyzed social media posts. And one question kept appearing again and again. Why did Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni rarely appear together at first? Nobody thought much of it. Film productions are complicated. Schedules conflict. Creative disagreements happen all the time. Hollywood has seen that before, but the speculation refused to disappear. Instead, it grew. Every interview became a clue. Every appearance became a talking point. Every silence became part of the story. And slowly, the conversation stopped being about the movie. It became about what might have happened behind the scenes. Nobody knew it yet. But a film that was supposed to celebrate one of the most successful novels of the decade was quietly moving toward one of Hollywood's most public controversies. And this time, the drama wouldn't stay behind the camera. For weeks, the rumors remained rumors, speculation, online theories, and endless discussions across social media. Nobody outside the production truly knew what had happened. Then everything changed. Because the conflict was no longer being discussed by fans, it was now being discussed by lawyers. In December 2024, Blake Lively filed formal complaints and later legal claims connected to her experience during the production of It Ends With Us. The allegations immediately became national news. Major newspapers covered the story. Television networks broke into regular programming. Entertainment websites pushed updates by the hour. And suddenly, a film that had been created to tell a story about healing was generating headlines for entirely different reasons. The public reaction was immediate. Some people praised Blake for speaking publicly. Others questioned the allegations. Many simply waited for more information. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. This was no longer a private disagreement. It had become a public battle, and public battles rarely remain simple. Because in Hollywood, reputation can be as valuable as money, sometimes even more valuable. Careers are built over decades, one film at a time, one interview at a time, one carefully managed public appearance at a time. But controversy can change everything overnight. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni strongly denied the allegations. Through legal representatives, he rejected the claims and insisted that his side of the story had not yet been heard. That response immediately changed the conversation. Because many people expected silence. Others expected damage control. Some expected a settlement. Instead, both sides appeared prepared to fight, and the conflict grew larger by the day. Every statement generated headlines. Every headline generated reactions. Every reaction created another wave of coverage. Soon, the dispute was no longer about a single production. It became a debate about workplace culture, power dynamics, accountability, celebrity influence, and the way public opinion forms in the digital age. Millions of people began discussing a situation they had never personally witnessed. Reporters analyzed legal filings. Commentators debated the facts. Fans searched for clues. And social media became a courtroom of its own. But unlike a real courtroom, there were no rules of evidence, no sworn testimony, no judge, only opinions, and those opinions were growing louder every day. As pressure mounted, the entertainment industry watched carefully. Studios watched. Agents watched. Publicists watched. Because everyone understood the same reality. No matter how the legal process ended, the consequences had already begun. And then, the story took another dramatic turn. Because Justin Baldoni wasn't preparing a quiet defense. He was preparing a counterattack, one that would shock Hollywood, and push the conflict into an entirely new phase. The accusations had become public. The headlines were everywhere, and Hollywood was watching closely. But nobody expected what would happen next, because the response wasn't going to be defensive. It was going to be a declaration of war. Hollywood has seen lawsuits before. It has seen scandals, public feuds, broken partnerships, and careers collapse under the weight of controversy. But what happened next caught even experienced entertainment reporters by surprise. Because Justin Baldoni wasn't retreating. He wasn't disappearing from public view, and he wasn't accepting the role many people had already assigned to him. Instead, he fought back. In January 2025, Baldoni and his legal team launched a massive counterclaim. The amount immediately captured international attention. $400 million. The number was so large that it instantly became the headline, not just in entertainment media, but across mainstream news as well. Television hosts repeated it. Journalists debated it. Social media exploded with reactions, and suddenly, the story changed once again. This was no longer simply about allegations. It was about competing narratives, competing versions of reality, and a legal battle that neither side seemed willing to abandon. According to Baldoni's legal filings, he believed his reputation had been unfairly damaged. His team argued that public perception had been manipulated, that his career had suffered significant harm, and that the accusations against him had created consequences long before any courtroom could evaluate the evidence. Blake Lively's legal team strongly disagreed. They maintained their position, rejected the counterclaims, and continued defending the allegations already made public. Now there were two stories, two versions of events, two groups of lawyers, and millions of people trying to decide who they believed. The internet immediately split into camps. Supporters of Blake saw the counterclaim as an attempt to discredit her accusations. Supporters of Baldoni viewed it as evidence that there was another side to the story. The debate became relentless. Every article generated thousands of comments. Every interview sparked arguments. Every new court filing became breaking news. The legal battle had become a media battle. And in modern celebrity culture, those two things are often impossible to separate. Because public opinion matters. Reputation matters. Narrative matters. Sometimes, they matter almost as much as the legal arguments themselves. As the conflict intensified, another familiar name began appearing in headlines. Ryan Reynolds, one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Blake Lively's husband, known worldwide for blockbuster films, sharp humor, and one of the strongest public images in entertainment. Now his name was appearing alongside legal filings, media reports, and endless speculation. The involvement of such a high-profile celebrity increased attention dramatically. Reporters who had barely covered the dispute before suddenly joined the story. International media expanded coverage. Online interest surged. And what had started as a dispute connected to one movie was becoming a worldwide celebrity controversy. For the public, the situation grew increasingly confusing. New claims appeared constantly. Legal language became more complicated. Headlines grew more dramatic, and certainty became harder to find. People wanted a clear answer. A hero, a villain, a simple explanation. Instead, they found legal documents, competing arguments, conflicting interpretations, and a conflict that seemed to grow larger every week. Yet despite all the noise, the biggest surprise had not arrived yet, because soon, another world-famous name would enter the conversation. Not as a defendant, not as an accuser, but simply through association. And that single name would push the controversy far beyond Hollywood. It would transform it into a global story. The accusations were serious. The counterattack was massive. Public opinion was dividing. And then, a name recognized by hundreds of millions of people around the world appeared in the headlines: Taylor Swift. And from that moment on, this story was no longer just a Hollywood controversy. For months, the conflict had remained largely contained within Hollywood. Actors, lawyers, studios, entertainment journalists. The people most invested in the industry were paying attention. Everyone else only followed from a distance. But then something happened. A single name appeared in media coverage, and suddenly millions of new people became interested. Taylor Swift, one of the most famous entertainers on earth. A global superstar whose influence extends far beyond music. A single concert announcement can dominate headlines. A single social media post can generate worldwide attention, and a single mention of her name can transform a story overnight. That is exactly what happened here. Taylor Swift was not directing the movie. She was not producing the film. She was not a party to the legal dispute, yet her connection to Blake Lively and discussions surrounding communications relevant to the case were enough to pull her name into public conversations. The reaction was immediate. News organizations expanded coverage. Entertainment websites published special reports. Social media activity surged. People who had never heard of the legal dispute before suddenly wanted answers. Why was Taylor Swift being mentioned? What role, if any, did she play? How much did she know? The questions multiplied rapidly. And as always, the internet rushed to fill the gaps. Some theories were reasonable. Others were wildly speculative. Many spread faster than verified information. That has become one of the defining characteristics of modern celebrity culture. Information travels quickly. Speculation travels even faster. And certainty often arrives long before facts do. The legal process moved carefully, methodically, one filing at a time, one motion at a time, one decision at a time. But public discussion followed a completely different rhythm, faster, louder, more emotional, and infinitely less patient. Every mention of Taylor Swift generated new headlines. Every headline generated new reactions. Every reaction created another cycle of coverage. The story was no longer confined to a movie adaptation. It was no longer confined to Hollywood. It had become part of global pop culture. Millions of people who had never watched It Ends With Us were now discussing the controversy, not because they cared about the film, but because they recognized the names involved. That is the power of celebrity, and also its burden. Because once enough attention arrives, it becomes almost impossible to control the narrative. Every statement is analyzed, every silence becomes meaningful, every friendship becomes a topic of discussion, and every appearance is interpreted through the lens of controversy. For Blake Lively, the attention intensified. For Justin Baldoni, the scrutiny increased. For Taylor Swift, the headlines continued. And for the public, the line between confirmed facts and online speculation became increasingly difficult to see. Meanwhile, the lawyers continued working, away from cameras, away from social media, away from the endless cycle of commentary, because while the internet debated theories, the legal battle itself was entering its most important phase. Evidence, documents, communications, discovery, the stage where every detail matters. The stage where narratives are tested, and where public assumptions can collide with legal reality. Because eventually, every major controversy reaches a moment when headlines are no longer enough. A moment when evidence becomes more important than opinion, and that moment was approaching fast. The internet wanted answers. The media wanted headlines. Fans wanted certainty. But the courtroom wanted something else. Evidence. And soon, every message, every document, and every detail would become part of a legal battle that neither side could fully control. Eventually, every public controversy reaches the same destination, the courtroom. Not television studios, not social media, not celebrity gossip websites. Because no matter how loud public opinion becomes, legal disputes are ultimately decided through evidence, and evidence became the center of everything. As both sides prepared their cases, attention shifted away from interviews and headlines toward documents, communications, internal records, and private conversations. Lawyers on both sides began demanding information, emails, text messages, meeting notes, production records, anything that could support their version of events. This phase of litigation is often called discovery. To the public, it sounds technical, almost boring. To experienced attorneys, it is where major cases are won or lost, because discovery can reveal details that never reach public view, facts hidden behind headlines, conversations that explain decisions, and evidence capable of strengthening or weakening an entire case. The stakes were enormous, not just financially, professionally, personally. Every document mattered. Every communication mattered. Every inconsistency mattered, and every new filing generated another wave of public attention. Entertainment reporters monitored court records daily. Legal analysts debated the significance of every ruling. Social media users examined fragments of information and tried to construct the entire story, sometimes accurately, sometimes not. Meanwhile, the legal process moved at its own pace, slow, methodical, often frustratingly slow for people following the story online. Because real litigation rarely resembles a movie. There are no dramatic speeches every day, no shocking revelations every hour. Instead, there are procedures, deadlines, arguments over evidence, arguments over procedure, arguments about what should be included, and arguments about what should remain excluded. The result was a conflict that seemed endless. One side filed motions, the other responded. Then came replies, then hearings, then additional filings. Each development produced fresh headlines, each headline produced fresh reactions, and each reaction added more pressure to an already volatile situation. By this point, the dispute had evolved far beyond the original controversy. It was no longer simply about a film, or a workplace disagreement, or even a lawsuit. It had become a struggle over narrative, over credibility, over public trust. Because in Hollywood, reputation is currency. Studios invest in it, brands invest in it, audiences invest in it. And once doubt enters the equation, the consequences can be difficult to predict. Then came one of the most significant developments in the entire conflict. A federal judge dismissed much of Baldoni's $400 million lawsuit. The ruling immediately generated headlines across the country. Supporters of Blake Lively viewed it as validation. Supporters of Baldoni argued that the broader dispute remained unresolved. Legal experts rushed to explain the decision. Commentators debated its implications. And social media once again divided into opposing camps. Yet despite the noise, one reality remained unchanged. The legal battle was not fully over, and neither was the public debate. People continued choosing sides, continued arguing, continued searching for certainty. But certainty remained elusive, because complicated disputes rarely provide simple answers, especially when they involve powerful people, powerful lawyers, and millions of people watching from the outside. The deeper the public looked, the more complicated the story became. And perhaps that was the biggest surprise of all. After months of headlines, millions of words, and endless speculation, many people still could not agree on what truly happened. The legal filings continued, the headlines continued, the arguments continued. But eventually, another question emerged. Not who would win, not who would lose, but whether anyone involved could ever return to the life they had before. Because some battles leave scars, even after the war is over. Every major controversy eventually reaches the same point. The headlines slow down. The television debates become less frequent. Social media moves on to the next story. And the public begins paying attention to something else. That is the nature of modern attention. Fast, intense, and temporary. But the consequences rarely disappear as quickly as the headlines. Long after reporters leave, long after trending topics fade, and long after court filings stop dominating the news, the people involved must continue living with the aftermath. That is where the real story begins. Because legal battles do not only affect courtrooms, they affect reputations, relationships, careers, and public trust. For Blake Lively, the controversy transformed the way millions of people viewed her. For years, she had been one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars, an actress associated with success, fashion, influence, and a carefully managed public image. But once controversy enters the public sphere, control becomes difficult. Every interview is re-examined, every statement is scrutinized, every public appearance becomes a subject of discussion. Whether fair or unfair, that attention changes things. For Justin Baldoni, the consequences were equally significant. Before the dispute, much of his public reputation was built around empathy, personal growth, positive messaging, and advocacy. Then suddenly, those same qualities became part of a national debate. Supporters defended him, critics challenged him, and millions of strangers formed opinions about a person they had never met. That is one of the strange realities of celebrity culture. The public often feels close to famous people, close enough to judge them, close enough to defend them, close enough to believe they understand them. Yet most of what we know comes through screens. Interviews, articles, photographs, clips on social media, tiny fragments of much larger lives. And when controversy appears, those fragments become the foundation of entire narratives. Some narratives prove accurate, others do not. But once they take hold, they can be remarkably difficult to change. Perhaps that is why stories like this become so powerful, because they are not simply about celebrities. They are about belief. Who do we trust? Why do we trust them? And how quickly are we willing to change our minds in the age of social media? Those questions matter more than ever. Information travels instantly. Rumors travel even faster. And certainty often arrives before evidence has had time to catch up. The legal system moves slowly, sometimes frustratingly slowly, but public opinion moves at extraordinary speed. A single headline can influence millions of people. A single viral post can reshape an entire conversation. And a single accusation can alter reputations before any courtroom reaches a conclusion. That reality does not belong only to Hollywood. It belongs to all of us, because every day we consume stories. We react to them, we share them, we comment on them, and sometimes we decide what we believe before we know the full picture. Maybe that is the most important lesson hidden inside this controversy. Not who was right, not who was wrong, not who won, and not who lost, but how difficult it has become to separate facts from narratives in a world driven by attention. One day, the legal disputes will end, the final documents will be filed, the last hearings will conclude, and another story will replace this one in the headlines. That is inevitable, but the effects may last much longer, because reputations have long memories. The internet has an even longer one, and public perception rarely disappears completely. Perhaps history will eventually offer clearer answers, perhaps it will not. But regardless of the outcome, one reality remains impossible to ignore. A film that was supposed to tell a story about love, pain, and healing became the center of one of Hollywood's most closely watched public conflicts, and in doing so, it reminded the world of something fame often hides. The brighter the spotlight, the harder it becomes to escape the shadows. Maybe one day, people will remember it ends with us primarily for the film itself. Maybe they will remember the performances, the story, and the message that first attracted millions of readers. Or maybe they will remember the controversy that followed, the legal battle, the headlines, the arguments, and the questions that still divide public opinion. Only time will decide. But one thing is already certain. The story behind the cameras became almost as famous as the story on the screen, and once that happened, nothing would ever look quite the same again.